Welcome everyone. My name is Shirley and I will be your moderator this evening. Tonight's webinar is How to Integrate 3D Printing and Milling into a High Production Practice. I'm so excited to welcome Dr. Meredith Gantos and Dr. Tony Mennito as our speakers tonight. Dr. Mennito is a private practice dentist as well as an adjunct faculty member at the MUSC College of Dental Medicine in Charleston, South Carolina. And Dr. Gantos is a master of the Academy of General Dentistry, master in the College of Sedation Dentistry, and leads a team of top dental providers at the Gantos Dental Group in Naperville, Illinois. Dr. Gantos and Dr. Mennito are both experts in digital dentistry and the digital workflow, so we are very excited for this engaging conversation. Before we get started tonight, I would like to take a moment to go over some quick housekeeping. We'd love for this to be an engaging conversation, so if you have a question, please type it into the Q&A box and we will address them, or as many of them as we can, at the end of the webinar. CE is not available for this webinar or on demand. And welcome, Dr. Gantos and Dr. Mennito, and thank you so much for being with us tonight. I will pass it over to you now because I know we have a lot to cover.
Indeed, we do. Appreciate everybody joining us. I know I'm super excited about this webinar. This is the first time I've ever done a format like this where it's two clinicians kind of showing cases and talking about technology, and to have somebody as accomplished as Dr. Gantos with me is actually an honor. So I'm super excited for this. Hope you guys enjoy. So we're going to nerd out here a little bit on technology and talk about the things we both do in our practice. And I think you'll find that we do things just a little bit differently, which will hopefully benefit you, because as we all know, none of us really practice in the same way. We all have different styles of practice and things like that. So what are we trying to accomplish in the next 60 minutes or so? We're going to learn why and how we've integrated this technology into our practice. I think why is an important question you need to ask yourself when you're thinking about making this type of purchase. And then once you figure out why you need something, then how to implement it is this question number 2, basically. We're going to talk about materials a little bit. Once again, the technology is one thing, but when it comes to dental materials, those are the things that we're actually placing into our patient's mouth. So really important to talk about what are realistic expectations for these materials, and we'll talk about some cases. So really excited for this. So first, I wanted to start about talking about the economics of printing and milling. And as I think about this, I think a lot of people sometimes will ask me, should I get a mill or should I get a printer? And I don't necessarily see them as equivalent technologies. And I'll talk about the reason for that. People think that when you're talking about a printer and a miller or printer and a mill, that they're comparing apples to apples, but it's really and honestly not like that. So when we talk about the economics and we look at just the capital costs that are involved in purchasing these technologies, you'll find that printing is considerably less expensive than milling, right? I would say somewhere, maybe big round numbers, a mill is going to cost you 3 to 5 times more than a printing system. And when you look at the materials for those, pretty much the same numbers apply, though it does vary considerably from material to material. So, when you're talking about per restoration costs for a printed restoration, somewhere in the neighborhood maybe of $5, $5 to $10. And for a block of Emacs, as you see here, that you would mill in your mill, it's probably going to cost you about $35. So the economics of printing is actually really attractive because the cost is so much lower. But I think we have to go into this with some realistic expectations about what we can expect from these materials. And I have a bit of a sweet tooth. And so last night I had an idea as I was at the grocery store. And to be honest, I really just had a hankering for ice cream. But I had some ideas to demonstrate kind of the difference between what I've seen in my clinic with printed restorations. And that is, this is a very simplistic explanation of wear resistance. But the printed restorations are basically the Breyers vanilla ice cream on the left. By the way, I'm not sponsored by Breyers, though if they were to reach out, I would probably get back to them because I do love my ice cream. But the absolutely, the vanilla ice cream are these minimally filled resins that are the current materials that we're able to print in our 3D printers, versus the cookies and cream on the right-hand side that is more of the moderately to highly filled composites that we use every day in our practices as direct composite restorations. And we all know that direct composite restorations wear. But what I want you to kind of explain in this is what I've seen with these 3D printed restorations, because these resins are not all that highly filled, especially compared to our direct composite materials. So if we think of the backside of this spoon as an opposing cusp, and we think about what the cumulative effect of that cusp when it's functioning on these materials, you can see that in the, this is so simplistic, in the vanilla ice cream, it's able to carve a groove very rapidly. In these filled materials, the cookies actually, this is ridiculous, the cookies actually act to inhibit some of the wear of that material. So the higher, in general, the higher filled a resin is, the more resistant it is to wear. Okay, so what do I mean by this? Well, the printed resins that I've placed into patients' mouths for numerous different indications, I've seen a lot of wear with these materials, so much more than I would see even in a direct composite. So that's the take-home message of my ice cream demo. And by the way, the ice cream was delicious, just so you know.
No, Tony,
but as we think, yeah.
Question that I'm pretty sure I know the answer to, but when you're talking about the printed restorations you've put in people's mouths, I assume those are bonded and not luted, but can you speak to, are we talking, if we're trying to compare both, are you
bonded? So I would say I've done both. All right. And what I'm talking about here are, I've done a couple cases where I've done 3D printed veneers that have been bonded on two structure. And then I have a few cases where I've done long-term provisionals that I have cemented on the teeth. So I think that's an important thing to know. But I've seen a tremendous amount of wear in both of these cases. And like I said, what I'm talking about, the materials I'm talking about are these sort of first and second generation of printed crown materials. All right, that we are now starting to see 1 year and 2 year follow-ups of those cases that have actually been in the mouth, right? So what I'll talk about in this slide is the fact that innovation in this area is moving very, very rapidly as far as printed resins go, versus our CAD/CAM materials, which really haven't had much in the way of innovation over the last, really 10 to 15 years. Zirconia and the process of milling and sintering zirconia has had some innovation, but for the most part, the materials are the same as they've been for the last probably 10 or 15 years. So there's not a whole lot of innovation on the CAD/CAM material side, but the clinical performance of those materials are fantastic. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. When we look at the printed materials, the clinical performance, for at least once again, in my hands, has not been fantastic, but the innovation is happening very, very rapidly. So the $1 million question is, when are those 3D printed materials going to catch up to milled materials, right? At what point will we have equivalency? And then at that point, we can talk about a printer being equivalent to a mill as far as what we can create in our practices. So hopefully I haven't lost you with the ice cream analogy, but once again, I just want people to have a realistic expectation for what they can expect from these materials, because there is a lot of marketing hype calling these permanent materials. But I guess the question comes down to, what does permanent mean to you? And it honestly may mean different things to us depending on what our practice looks like, right? And so when I think of permanent in my practice, I think of looking at the literature, right? I'm in academics, so I have to look at the data and what does the data show us about survivability, clinical survivability of these materials. And when we look at studies that show a 17-year survival rate of lithium disilicate at 95+%, in my mind, that is a permanent restoration. And until we get those printed restorations a little bit closer to that landmark, I think we need to be just a little bit careful about that. Meredith, any thoughts on that?
No, I think it's great information. I'm actually writing down a couple questions as you're talking. One thing that I wanted to kind of pick your brain on is some of those milled hybrid materials. And from your experience, I don't know how much you use like a Cerasmart or something like that, but how you've seen that sort of perform in relationship to a printed material. Because I think if we look at printed material, the Emax, that's like, that one's no contest, right?
Agree.
But I'm interested to hear your perspective on maybe a milled material that's a little bit more comparable to a printed material.
Absolutely. I actually have a case that I'll show where I used a few of those materials. So I'll talk about that a little bit here. That's a great question though. Because yeah, you're right. If we're talking about comparing apples to apples, are we really comparing apples to apples when it comes to Emax versus versus these printed materials? And I think that there can be some confusion there because they are being characterized as ceramics, even though we know they're really closer to resin than they are to ceramics. So a lot of the marketing, I think, has caused some confusion in people's minds. So this is just an opportunity for us to set it straight. That being said, 3D printing is one of my favorite things in our practice, and I'll talk about how I use it here in a few slides. But first, I'm going to talk about milling in our practice and why I love milling. And basically what it comes down to for me with milling is that it allows me to create phenomenal restorations, high quality restorations, every bit as good as I can get from my laboratory, but in my office in a single visit. And my patients love it. I love it. My team actually has learned to love it. This is something that is relatively new to this office that I'm currently in. And that's a big part of it. I think Meredith's going to talk about that. I'll even talk about that a little bit, how it's important to get your team on board with these technologies as well. But I want to show you a case that came into our office. This was a case that I did back in 2016, actually, where a patient came in. You can see he's got tremendous amount of wear of his natural dentition. He is a constricted bite case, some parafunction thrown in for good measure. And basically, he did not want to come see the dentist. His wife forced him to come. He had a younger wife. She was tired of looking at his teeth and basically made him come see me. And so this is Gary. Our plan with Gary was we needed to open his vertical dimension a little bit to create some restorative space. And so my idea for that was to use some milled overlays. And these overlays were going to be bonded to the tooth structure without any preparation. I was just going to put back what he had lost and reestablish that vertical dimension. And I did that using the material that Meredith was just talking about. This is basically they call them hybrids, hybrid materials. That's kind of a resin ceramic hybrid. But the reality is they're once again, closer to resin than they are to ceramic. And so these materials are really easy to mill. They're hand polished, so they're really convenient to place. And for this patient, because cost was an issue, I ended up just charging him the cost of an MODBL direct composite, right? So I'm delivering a resin to him. I'm charging him for a resin. And so in my mind, this was a good service. We were able to open up that vertical dimension, give us a little bit of space to start restoring length on his anterior teeth. So all I did was put a rubber dam on, did a little bit of beveling of sharp edges, etched, bonded, and bonded these right on top to the vertical dimension that I had established using a leaf gauge. All right, this is really straightforward way to do a rehab. Really, this was once again one that I had done 6 years ago. This is not the sexiest case I've ever done, but I love it because it shows how you can use the technology really to benefit a patient in need. Because if he had to do crowns, on 15 teeth, it would have taken us years to be able to do that. We were able to do it in a relatively short time with this technology and in a way that was economical for him. That same visit, I did some aesthetic buildups with some direct composite just to give him a little bit of time to test drive my smile design. but also to see if he could tolerate the vertical dimension. Now I know that most people tolerate vertical dimension changes just fine. I didn't necessarily know that back then. So did some aesthetic buildup, sent him on his way for I think it was 6 months that he was like this, and he came back and he was doing great with those buildups. There was some wear, Meredith, which is a good question. They kind of wear a little bit, I would say a little bit faster than two structure, but it wasn't that significant. Like I think I saw maybe just a wear facet on 1 or 2 areas. So while this definitely will wear faster than a ceramic material, I did not think that it wore as quickly as some of the printed materials that I've seen, including one that I had placed in my own mouth, by the way. I won't talk about that today, but once again, I've seen I've seen this firsthand, how much these materials wear.
Can I
He
ask?
came back. Yes, go for it.
No, go ahead. Well,
I was just going to go on with the case.
Well, with respect to setting patient expectations, when you open a bite with a material like that, what's your verbiage for a patient, or what are you telling them, with what they can expect? Because I know certainly with a lot of the printed stuff, I like to err on the side of, hey, if you need crowns in like 6 months, don't be mad at me. And if it lasts you 6 years, cool. I try
100%.
very low.
100%.
Curious with some of the like milled hybrids, what your verbiage is for that.
That's a great point. Like I said, I did this case in 2016. Nowadays, what I would do is I would at least do one of these overlays in an Emax lithium disilicate material to help hold that vertical dimension, and maybe limit some of the wear that we would see on those cases. So believe me, I am a brutally honest person when it comes to talking with my patients and setting expectations. And I think that that's important as we do these types of cases and utilize these newer materials that we don't really know how well they're going to perform. We need to set those expectations. That's really, really important. And to be honest with your patients about what they can expect. I mean, he knew I was doing him a favor as far as the cost goes for these. And once again, I charged him for a resin and I delivered a resin. So it's not like I was, charging him a ceramic crown fee for these and then giving him, even though you can, it's totally within the ADA guidelines for what you can charge for a ceramic crown. These materials fall into that category, these milled materials, and now some of these newer printed materials do as well. So that's a longer conversation that we probably won't have time for today, but maybe we'll get into it a little bit in the questions.
I love the concept of using like a couple, like one Emax on either side to hold that vertical, and that way you can control the bite and the wear pattern more, especially if you have them in a guard. That's so thoughtful. I've never thought to mix the materials like that. I love that suggestion. That's really cool.
Thanks. And from an economic standpoint, the cost of an Emax block is really the same as the cost of these hybrid blocks. So from an economic standpoint, you're not really losing out too much when you use those materials. That does take a little longer because it requires an oven cycle. But it's not a bad thing for you to mix in those more wear resistant ceramics. So like I said, he came back 6 months later. We did some cingulum preservation crown preparations on those anterior teeth. This was my initial design. He looked at it and he said, "Why are those edges so straight?" So I tweaked the design to make it a little more, he said, age appropriate. He wanted to look age appropriate. I said, "How's your wife going to feel about you looking age appropriate?" He said, "Don't worry about her." By the way, he told me every single time he came to the office, he was what I would characterize as a ball buster. If you know what a ball buster is, every time I saw him, he would tell me how much he hated the dentist. But he ended up being like a really good patient. And I think I kind of wore him down and we became kind of friends by the end of this treatment. But I milled these crowns out of Emax. I love dental dams. I know that's not a popular opinion, but delivered these under dental dam isolation, bonded these, and this is where we ended up with him. So the last visit that I saw him, he actually gave me a hug at the end of the visit and then told me that he hated the dentist after that. So you win some, you lose some. So the thing that I love about this case is really it cost me my time and about $400 worth of materials. So you can charge whatever you want for these. Obviously, you have to cover the cost of your equipment. So you have to be practical. You can't just be giving away dentistry just because, your material costs are a little bit lower. But you can really, really help patients who need it by mixing and matching materials and things like that. So, and as these printing materials get better and better, we'll be able to do that even more.
Now, Tony, do you schedule time to work on cases like that through your clinic day? Do you do that after hours? How do you kind of work that into your schedule?
That's a great question. We try to produce we try to schedule non-productive appointments on off days and off times, right? So our office is open 4 days a week. Thursdays is a little bit of a slower, low-key day for us. So sometimes we will put those non-productive appointments on Thursdays or even on a Friday to do that kind of work. If I'm able to do it quickly enough, and I was in this case, actually ends up being a really productive appointment because I didn't have any preparation for those overlays. So literally all I had to do was clean the teeth and bond them on, right? And then do those, I've gotten pretty good at doing anterior composites. Those were all charged as buildups. And then coming back to do the anteriors was a single visit case. And I, while I did drop the charge, I still, was able to, I feel like, get a good bit of production for the time that I spent.
Yeah. Do you find it builds a lot of value with your patients when you stage the treatment like that? So you can kind of show them that you're taking it for a test drive, you're working out the aesthetic to be what they want. And do you feel like that has helped with building the practice, generating more cosmetic cases?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, patients come to us a lot of times. We have a little bit of almost a specialty type practice in that patients come to us sometimes solely for cosmetics. They have a general dentist and they come to us solely for cosmetics. So there are times when they don't really know who we are. It's an opportunity to build some trust, right? And to start creating that relationship with those patients early on, which is obviously really important. And a lot of those patients will then come to us for their regular dental care after seeing kind of what we're able to do. So, I mean, the practice building that this technology can do for you is easily evident, and I think it's pretty obvious once you get in and start using it, how much your patients love you having the technology and being a master of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the other thing about milling is the ability to do our implant restorations, one, in a very timely fashion. And I'm talking about TruAbutment. There are other labs that do this. TruAbutment just happens to be the one that I use. And what TruAbutment is a digital lab that will create basically custom abutments for you off your intraoral scans. And if you have a mill, you can actually mill the crown from their design. So they will design the crown for you. For me, with the Planmeca mill, I can put it into the mill because it's an open milling system and mill that design that they've created for me. They then send me back the custom abutment, and I marry those two together and deliver it in the mouth. And I can turn these cases around in about a week to 10 days. It'll take, for a custom abutment from the laboratory, it would take at least a month. So the nice thing that I like is, once again, I can make these screw retained. The cost of an Emax block is about $35. The cost of the custom abutment's about $205. I give it a little love with some stain and glaze, and we get a really, really nice result. And once again, my patients love it because by the time they get to the point where the implant's ready to be restored, they've already had a really long path with that tooth, right? They've had to they've waited for months, and they don't want to wait another month and a half to get their crown once they're ready and come in for their final impression. So I really love that we're able to do this as well for our patients. So that's why I love milling. Now let's talk about 3D printing. And I didn't mean to poo-poo 3D printing because I do absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite things. And when you buy a 3D printing system, it's really these three pieces that you need. What you see on the left is the printer, the actual printer. In the middle, that purple thing is an alcohol bath. That's where you wash the prints once they come out of the printer. And then on the right is a post print cure box, because a lot of the times the material properties of these materials can be increased by doing post-processing, post-curing of those materials. And so all three of these are really important steps in the process. So just so you understand, if you get into printing, it's not just buying a printer, you're basically getting this whole system and this whole workflow. And I guess what I would ask people nowadays, this is a more of a common thing, is are you totally digital? In our practice, we don't have the ability to pour up stone, right? So if we have a patient who comes in and they want a whitening tray, right, or something that requires a simple procedure, but we can't create a model because we don't have stone and all the necessary things, because we don't take physical impressions, everything's digital. So we have a printer that we can use to make that. So in a totally digital practice, having a printer makes a lot of sense, because sometimes you need a physical thing, a physical model, to do some really simple workflows. We make a lot of Essex retainers, we make a lot of whitening trays and things like that. So we print a lot of models in our practice. So one thing that I really love. The other thing is, this is a problem solver for me. And we get a lot of patients who come to us already kind of halfway through treatment. So this is Joel. Joel came to me in a full arch of provisionals in the maxillary arch. He hated the fact that it has a reverse smile, right? He didn't like that. There's some other things that he didn't like about his smile. But Joel also needs a full arch of dentistry in the lower arch. So what I love this is we can use our 3D printer to stage treatment. So while he's getting implants placed, while he's getting all this work done in the lower arch, I can start and provisionalize his maxillary arch, which basically was his chief complaint, right? So I address his chief complaint in a way that will make him happy while we continue to get dentistry done in that lower arch that we need. So it all starts with some really good dental photography. This dental photography gets input into a design software. This is PlanCAD Premium, which is very similar to ExoCAD, which you may have heard of. You can put it into the Smile Creator software, which gives us all the anatomic landmarks. From there, we can create a digital design. This is that digital design now being printed. These materials are great for long-term provisionalization. So what I've done here is I've printed all these restorations. I can put them in Joel's mouth. He can have them while he's getting that lower arch of dentistry done, so we can kind of stage this treatment. The nice thing is, if something breaks, if something debonds, things happen in the course of a year or so while he's getting all this other treatment done, all I have to do is print out another one. So this is a full arch of essentially bridges. If one of those bridges breaks, it's $5, $7 for me to print another one and have it ready to go, because I already have the digital design. So the convenience of long-term provisionalization for 3D printing is immense, and we do it all the time. We do a lot of cases, bigger cases like this, where patients are in provisionals for a decent amount of time, and I love these materials for that. So that is one of the things that I really, really like about our 3D printer. What haven't I done well in my practice? And this is something that I think Meredith does really, really well, and that is, I haven't done a good job of training my team to do these things for me, right? Because I'm the dentist, really, my team should be trained to do these in a really efficient workflow. That's the way it should be done. I've done such a poor job, in fact, that my team made me a mouse pad, is what you see here, with the name of my lab, Mennito Designs, because I do so much of my own lab work, which I enjoy, to be honest, but it's not the most efficient way to do things. Luckily, in the past year, we've gotten Taylor to come to our practice. She is my dental assistant, and she's been really excited about learning some of this. So I'm starting to try to loosen up the control a little bit. But that is one thing I think that is really important. In a busy practice, you have to delegate some of these responsibilities to your team and make sure that they're trained to do so.
Now, how often, Tony, do you coordinate with maybe a dental lab or a professional designer?
That's a great question, because design can be the sticky bit for doing these things yourself. And so I would say now rarely do I use professional design services, but there are some times when if I have a full arch case, it takes me a decent amount of time to design a full arch case. And so, I will use an Evident, or there's a lot of design service companies out there that will do these designs for you. I don't use them that often because I really enjoy doing the design process myself. I think it's cheaper than therapy, and I think it helps me kind of get out of my own head from time to time, which I find is beneficial.
And for people who are looking to maybe expand their design skill set, what advice would you give them, or what have you done to really help you capitalize on designing a bit, really having that sort of expertise?
Sure. I mean, if you like to design, I think it benefits you to take a course, right? The Mod Institute has a lot of courses on digital design where they can really help hone those skills. But it is something that you have to have a passion for, I think, because it does take time and there is a learning curve there. So, I have been doing CAD/CAM dentistry, so I have a design background. I've been doing it for 14 years. And I think that helps. Doing just chairside CAD/CAM design, simple designs, has helped kind of transform from designing one tooth to designing full arches. I don't think you can go straight from 0 to full arches. I think it's kind of baby steps to get through that process.
Awesome. I'm just going to rearrange one thing here. I'm so sorry. Okay, beautiful. Okay, and then I know we've got to move on, but I just love picking your brain. My last question that I would hate for someone to ask me, but I'm going to ask you is, okay, so printing versus milling. I'm going to ask you, it's a twofold question. If you could only pick one to have, which one would it be? Or if you knew you were going to have both, which one would you start with?
I mean, I'll answer the second part first. I think you start with a printer because for the reasons I said before. I mean, I think if you're a completely digital practice, there are times when you need to have a physical thing for a lot of different purposes. And so I think a printer is fits kind of more categories and does more for you than just a mill that creates, crowns and bridges. So printer is a problem-solving solution. A mill does that, but to a lesser extent. And if I could only have one, I mean, it would have to be the printer at this point because we just use it for so many different things. Like I said, I love milling, but printing is a problem solver. Basically, there's nothing that comes into my office that I don't have a solution for with a scanner, design software, and a printer.
Love that. Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, now I hope I don't regret asking you some of those hard questions. So thank you so much for sharing those cases and the way you utilize both printing and milling. I know just on my digital journey, I've learned so much from you, and I've been so appreciative of your mentorship and seeing the ways you innovate and create. So just to kind of share a little bit of some more perspective to your point, my practice may be a little bit practice a little bit differently, a little bit more hectic, a little crazy. I try and delegate a lot in my office. So if there's something someone else can legally do in my office, I want them doing it. That's always kind of been my mentality. With respect to talking about printing versus milling, it has been just tremendously transformative for my practice in a lot of different ways. With respect to being efficient. So I am like a mover and a shaker. I'm a driver personality. I want to get in and out of ops. I want to serve as many patients as I can, but I want to do that with really quality dentistry. And so, this technology has really helped me do that in a really efficient way. But then also being the OCD dentist we all are, also trying to be as accurate and precise as possible, because I'm also someone that likes everything to go the way that I want it to go. I don't want surprises. I want to make sure everything is just meticulously planned and executed. And so this type of technology has been really instrumental in helping me with that as well. And then, of course, creating a really comfortable, streamlined, personalized experience for patients. I think that that is such a great marketing tool, but also just really curating that special type of culture within the office and within your patient population. Of course, having documentation. There's never a time I've had more information and regretted it, but certainly times where I wish I'd had a scan of something or more documentation of things. So the more digital we are, the more we have that record for a lifetime. And then, of course, the fun of it, to your point, always challenging yourself to really think creatively, to problem solve. I mean, to me, that's been some of the most fun, especially with printing and milling, as someone comes in with the most, off the wall situation, and we can have an emergency patient walk in with a fractured tooth and leave with a 3D printed flipper or, bonded Maryland bridge while we've extracted it and bone grafted it. Someone else is doing that, right? And they can walk out with that within, 60 minutes. So it just creates this whole new way of trying to think creatively to solve the same problems we've always solved. So just going through some really standard, general dentistry types of cases, the things that kind of walk in the door, every day. So this is Miss Lizzie. So Miss Lizzie and her dear mother with her notepad that was like encyclopedia thick. They had been to so many different providers. And so Lizzie comes in with her mom and they're torn between, do we do ortho? Do we do restorative? And mom kind of says, listen, we've seen a million people. I've got all these notes. But if we're just going to have to restore these teeth in the end, I'm thinking we just skip the ortho and we just go to restorations. But, she wants the 30th opinion. So she comes in to sort of talk about that. So, we do our evaluation. Okay. And mom also mentions, she has some concerns about the gingival display, in addition to the diastema and the size of, the teeth, particularly number 7 is what's really bugging them. So we gather all our data, right? She's got 7's of peg lateral. We've got this diastema. We've got some sort of, asymmetric gingival displays. Our centrals are a little bit shorter. We can't really feel our CEJs underneath the tissue, and she has a super deep bite. So we're kind of making our assessments here. We're doing our smile analysis, and all of this is, we can do this on our smile design software. We can draw on photos. We can use these things to really educate, but it's really helpful to have all this data and be able to look at it in a really systematic way. So when we're looking at our soft tissues, we see that, okay, we've got some, midline discrepancies. We've got some irregular, smile arcs and excessive buccal quarters, asymmetric gingival display again. Our axial inclination is off. We have so many things that are just off with this case. So that's really helpful then when we're talking with mom, because again, mom comes in saying, well, let's just get it restored if she's going to need those restorations anyway. But we can educate mom with the photography, with smile design software to say, hey, listen, we have all of these concerns and all of these things that we can do. And so this is something that I really love. This is not this particular case because I have a bug in my system that I need to fix, but we can take our smile design software, we can take our warp tools, and we can actually manipulate the teeth, manipulate the gingiva to show what it is that we're diagnosing and what it is that we're seeing. So in Lizzie's case, we're able to make some type of mock-up. And again, this isn't her specific case, but it's the same software. It's the same way that we would do it, where we can take those pictures, we can take the scans, we can overlay it, and we can design something that we're then able to pop onto her teeth or bond onto her teeth for a short amount of time and really be able to illustrate to mom why we feel like the ortho is important. Because to me, when I worked Lizzie's case up and I'm looking at all the things that I want to correct in Lizzie's case, I can't do that with just a restorative solution. And mom's really driving that for a restorative type of solution. So this is super helpful. If I want to print this in a PMMA, if I want to, mill it in a PMMA, if I want to print it in a resin, I can do that. Or I can turn that into some type of dental model. I can make a stent, and then I can use Bisacryl to overlay that. And so we can do that to really show mom, hey, here's what all we need to do. And so with that type of analysis, with that type of patient education, utilizing these materials and these technologies, now we have mom on board. Now we have Lizzie on board to understand why it's not just, hey, let's fill in the holes with a plastic material, right? We really need to get the teeth into the right position. We really want to reduce that gummy smile. We really want to make the correct contours. So when I'm sending my orthodontic referral, I can be a complete psychopath and tell the orthodontist exactly what I want to do, how I want to do that, right? What teeth I want intruded, where I want things to go, what I want lined up by maybe a gingival margin versus an incisal margin, and how I want everything to happen. So my orthodontists, I'm sure when they see a referral from me, like want to run the other direction. But I can send all of that really high level detail so that I know when it comes time to do the final cosmetic work, I'm going to have this case set up exactly how I want. So I send this to my orthodontist, bless his heart, great man. He replies back and he says, okay, listen here, crazy lady, I can do this for you, but can you at least mock up 7 and 10 for me so I have a notion of what width requirements we want, where we want to actually put these in the face. So we have this conversation. Ortho is asking me to mock up 7 and 10. So I have different ways I can do that, right? I can invite Lizzie back in. I can freehand a direct composite if I want. I'm going to be honest, freehanding a direct composite, that is not my strong suit. It's not my strength. I don't get a lot of joy out of it. And I never feel like when I step back and look at it, it is ever exactly what I want. And I just want to be OCD about it. It's also a little bit more time consuming. And again, I love delegating. I love being able to do what I need to do to achieve it, but with the assistance that I can to be able to be really efficient. So the other thing I could do, right, I can maybe either outsource a digital model, or I can maybe wax it up digitally and then make a stent and use direct composite. I could make a model and then maybe use a clear type of stent material, and I can use a flowable resin and do injection molding. So that would be another way of doing it. That is a really beautiful way. But again, it's a little bit more effort than what I want to do in this particular situation, or that I want to spend on a couple laterals before starting ortho. So that takes me to milling and printing, right? Because those are going to be the most time efficient. Those are things I can delegate to an assistant to design and mill or print. So my options are I can mill that in like a PMMA or maybe one of those hybrid materials. I can do block milling. I can do puck milling, which drives the cost down even more. Or again, I can print a model for stent fabrication, or like we did in this case, I can just direct to print veneers. So that's what we ended up doing in this case. So this is that designed in that Plaid CAD premium software. One of the things that I love about this, like most softwares, is that you can mirror and you can copy other teeth. So this was something where I was just able to really create the symmetry that we want, and kind of line things up the way that we want them lined up, so that the orthodontist knows better now where to put those teeth. So when Lizzie comes back to me for gingival recontouring or crown lengthening and for these final restorations, I have everything planned meticulously. So that is Miss Lizzie before. That's Miss Lizzie with 7 and 10 bonded on there. And now she's set to see ortho. And so we can get everything into the correct position, reduce those buccal corridors, intrude the teeth we need to intrude, and everything will be set up for us for when Lizzie comes back.
Meredith, this is brilliant because a lot of, especially younger dentists, don't understand that orthodontists don't know where teeth should go. Like they were taught to close spaces, right? So if they're ever asked to leave spaces, or if they have teeth that are not the ideal size, it is so helpful for us to make the teeth the right size before ortho. So that really helps them to be able to visualize where the proper position of those teeth should be. So this is honestly like next level stuff, because once again, this is your patient, right? And if you don't guide the orthodontist, you're probably not going to get the result that you want.
Absolutely. Well, and at the end of the day, the relationship, right? The person who is seeing, the patient for their recare, who's seeing them for years and years, it's us, right? We're the quarterback of the restorative team. And so the orthodontist, while they have such an important role, they're removed from that situation. And at the end of the day, it's going to fall back on me on whether this case is done properly or not, right? Whether we accomplish all the goals that we set out to, reducing that gummy smile, changing tooth shape and increasing proportion and symmetry, right? That all falls back on me at the end of the day. So having that type of control to really trying to make that a seamless process. And again, if someone's going to be a crazy lady like I am and so, detail oriented with the orthodontist, I owe it to that person to also try and communicate that in a way that doesn't make it difficult for them, right? So, this is, to me, this is like regular general dentistry types of situations that we get day in and day out, where if I don't have these tools, if I'm not able to really illustrate and show mom and show Lizzie why the ortho matters, I don't know if they would have really grasped it and if we would really be able to get the end result that we're going to get with this case, knowing that we've planned it this way.
Love it. And all this takes is a delivery appointment, right? I mean, it's not like a chairside veneer where you got to sculpt it. All the designing is done without the patient in the chair. They just come in and you deliver and it's done.
You've nailed it. And at our
So
rep
efficient.
visit, when we're talking about things like this is almost a completely assistant-driven appointment. So when we're taking records to talk about anything cosmetic or most things in our office, we take full digital scans, upper, lower. We're doing a full photo series. So my hygienists do that as well. So every new patient in our practice has that. Most patients that are coming in with any type of concern that's aesthetic or ortho or anything like that, the assistant is already doing all that before I even walk in the room. And so that's something where I can delegate to the assistant, hey, ortho's asked for us to mock up 7 and 10. They can design that. And it's as simple as clicking on 10 and saying, hey, mirror image this for me, overlaying that on 7, maybe tweaking things a little bit. And then I can check that in 2 seconds, say, that looks great. I love it. Go ahead and print it. They can print it. They can wash it. They can cure it. And it goes in Lizzie's case pan and Lizzie's appointed to come back in. And for me to bond those on is, it's such a quick process because it is no prep. It's an easy cleanup. I can put Teflon tape, air braid. I mean, it's just so easy and predictable. And bonding this stuff, it does stay on really well, right? So
100% agree. Yeah.
And staining, wear, things like that, we have to be really mindful of. I wish I'd thrown it in this presentation, but the most hilarious thing I've ever done to another human being was a full maxillary arch of 3D printed temps and, bless her heart, shaped turmeric. And what turmeric does, of course, to bisacryl and to printed resin, but she came back in and she looked fit for Halloween. So we do have to be mindful of some of those things, but for a situation like this, it works really, really well. All righty. And then just to kind of share again, another real sort of situation that we deal with. This is Renee. So Renee is almost 50 years old. She's been walking around with these crowns on 9 and 10 for God knows how long. And not only are they, of course, I wrote anesthetic, excuse me there, but not only are they unaesthetic, right? But they're really poor fitting. If we look at the x-rays, right, we've got open margins, potentially carious margins. But what's really interesting is Renee's come to my office a couple times. I've seen her. Renee doesn't even mention these crowns. These crowns don't bug Renee. Renee doesn't want to talk about these crowns. And this is one of those where, like, if you're a patient of my practice, I cannot have you walking around town telling people I'm your dentist with teeth like this, right?
Yeah.
I think we all have some of those patients where you're just like, oh my gosh, like, please don't tell people. So, I start talking with Renee and I, kind of ask her, how she feels about him and start to kind of dig what I can out. And what I learned from Renee is she really would love to change these crowns out. However, finances are a really, really big concern for Renee at this time. So that is her number one concern. She's more concerned about that than she is the appearance of them. So again, we do kind of our smile analysis here. We're looking at, what things do we like, don't we like, so we can figure out how to make a really thoughtful treatment plan and figure out maybe a more economical way of helping Renee. So when we actually start breaking down Renee's aesthetics, her midline is pretty acceptable. Her lip volume and mobility is acceptable. Her buccal corridors are acceptable. Like when we start looking at all this, her gingival symmetry is actually really good. It's really just porcelain work, right? It's size, it's proportion. Yes, it's some of the axial inclination of those crowns because they make them, it looks like they're, sliding off her face, right? And some staining. But this is actually a really straightforward cosmetic case. We really just need to fix these two older crowns that as she's grown, as we've had that altered passive eruptive process, we just now have a lot more of the neck of that crown exposed, right? So that is good news because Renee's concerned about cost. So I can say to Renee, hey, we can actually make this look pretty good, pretty minimally, right? This is all we really need to do. It's really just these two crowns. The gingival symmetry is pretty decent. We've got some weird embrasures and, some weird links, but that's all going to get corrected in the porcelain work. So again, we're going to maintain a lot of the themes and really just look at using 7 and 8 as our guides for 9 and 10 to improve that appearance. So great news, Renee. This is simple. It's just two crowns. That's all it is, right? And so, of course, we get that question that we love to hear, which is, okay, that sounds great, but what does my insurance cover? And so we looked this up for Renee, and unfortunately, on top of Renee being super financially conscious about this case, we also learned that she also has no assignment of benefits in our office for this stuff. Because we're an out-of-network provider, I'm assuming she must have Delta. Whatever it is, it just overcomplicates it just a bit more, right? But again, I am determined to not have Renee walk around and tell people that I'm her dentist with these crowns that are slipping off her teeth. So
they're so bad. They're so
I know.
bad.
Oh, and she's walked around like this for, oh my gosh, how many years, right? So I talk with Renee and we decide to sort of stage this case out. So what we're going to do is we're going to do our 3D printed crowns first, and then we're going to stage it out. And each year she can kind of convert one of those to a porcelain ceramic crown, right? And so we're going to ride this case out a little bit longer. And so what that'll do is this first year, when I do a 3D printed crown, depending on what I'm replacing, I will code it out as a buildup because technically I'm going to build that tooth up. And when I do my final restoration, I'm going to prep right through that. So we can code out the buildups. That can be, what we're going to financially plan for this year. And then each year we can kind of move forward from there. So again, it just stage this out. Sometimes when I do the 3D printed crowns, again, it really sort of depends on the particular situation, what's going to be most helpful for the patient and most fair. Sometimes I will bill them as provisional crowns, and it's somewhat of a nominal fee. It's a few $100, depending on, again, how long they're going to be in play. But oftentimes, like it's either a 4-surface resin or it's a buildup or something where we can at least utilize some of those insurance benefits. So 3D printed crown workflow, super simple. It's full arch scans. We're going to prep it. We can design it in-house or we can outsource that, right? If I'm a dentist that doesn't have the time, the patience, the desire to do my own design work, that certainly doesn't preclude people from utilizing this type of technology. It's super easy. We send that to a designer. They can get that done and whipped back real quick for us. And then we can print it and customize it. So this is a little video of Miss Renee. And again, this is assistant driven. So I'm going to walk out, do a hygiene check or do maybe a small procedure. The assistant is going to erase that. So we have our pre-op model if it's something we want to reference, which in this case we don't. And then we're going to prep the teeth. I'm going to walk out. Oh, I'm sorry. We're scanning the posing, but we prep the teeth. Again, I'm walking out. This is an assistant scanning this. This is the assistant doing all of this for us that we've trained so that I can be maximally productive. We did do this design in our office. I believe an assistant did this, to be totally honest. But then I probably went back in and made this little video for here. So you can see I'm a little more clumsy when I do it. But I'm literally just mirror imaging the adjacent teeth. I'm going through, I'm making everything look nice. And then we're going to print those out. I always print a few of those out. And then we can bond those in. So Miss Renee starts like this. And when Miss Renee is leaving, these are her 3D printed temps. And you can see they're fresh. I've still got blood in there from cleaning up my cement. But that's what that looks like. And so we've got her in a much better position, in a much better state that now, again, we can phase that treatment. She can tell people I'm her dentist, and Renee is going to feel much more confident on a budget. So
I love getting creative, how you got creative with how to code those two. First of all, they look great, and what a huge change. And sometimes people don't realize that they have bad dental work until you show them what good dental work looks like, right? So but getting creative by calling those buildups is honestly brilliant, because you're going to come back and do crowns anyway, and so this way you're maximizing the benefit from the insurance. So that's it's really smart.
Thank you. All righty. And then just a couple quick cases. I know we're kind of getting to the end of our time together here, but again, ways that I just love this technology. So Miss Carla, she doesn't have the most beautiful teeth to start with. That's okay. She doesn't care about them. If they don't care, I typically don't care either. But I wake up one day and it's a Saturday morning and I've got a full packed schedule. It's a hectic day. And I wake up to this text from Miss Carla. You can see it's October 1st, 2022, 6:16 a.m. I fell, I cracked my lip open. Can you help me get this resolved? Please help, I'm desperate. I don't actually remember how Carla has my number, but she does. And so this is how I start my day, knowing that I have a full packed schedule. So obviously this needs emergent dental care, right? I can't say to Carla, hey, call me on Monday when I'm back in. I'm busy, right? I've got to be able to help Carla. And so again, that's where being able to have tools in our arsenal that prior to having this technology we didn't have is so amazingly helpful and tremendous. Because I'll be honest, I don't totally know 100% how I really could have helped her to the best of my abilities, especially on the sort of time crunch that I was, if I didn't have a printer, if I didn't have a mill, if I didn't have access to these things in my office. So Carla comes in, we take a CBCT, we realize 9 is going to be non-restorable. We're going to have to do an implant there. I believe 8 ended up needing a root canal. And then of course 7 and 10 have some fractures. So this is completely assistant driven. It's a printed bridge. But the other thing that I love about this stuff is I can start tissue training from the very beginning, and I can adapt that, right? Because I can take that off as she's healing and I can modify, can add flowable, I can change things. So I can really create that ovate pontic site that I want when it comes time to do her finals, right? And so that's super helpful that I'm not losing that papilla there, that I'm able to really help, shape that tissue the way that I want to. The other thing, again, which we kind of talked about a little bit, with some of your cases, is it really helps with that communication with the patient, because Carla really wanted her 8 and 9 shorter personally than what I wanted. But this was Carla's aesthetic. She wanted 8 and 9 to be almost on the same plane, you can see, as 7 and 10. And so that was something where when I designed it, I didn't have it looking like that. But through messing around with her provisionals, and so on that left side, those are the 3D printed provisionals. Obviously some healing has occurred there, but we're able to really communicate and talk about the end aesthetic. So by the time that gets converted to porcelain, whether we're milling that in office, whether it's block, whether it's pucks, or whether we're lazy, we don't want to do it, and we're sending it to the lab to do, right? Either way we go about it, we have exactly the aesthetic that we want. And it's as easy as hitting duplicate or, having some type of go by to mimic. So again, just super helpful to have those tools. And then we're at 7 o'clock here. So the last case that I just want to kind of leave on the table, and I wish I had better documentation of this one, but it's just, to me, it's such a wonderful, just sort of thought generating case, right? So Miss Katie, who's 28 years old, comes into my office and Katie smiles and I immediately see Katie's teeth, right? And my initial impression is, okay, we've got, a hybrid, we have a denture, we've got tooth replacement options on our hands, right? When I look at Katie and I look at just her photo, my first thought is not that these are restorable, salvageable teeth. But when you look at the x-rays that we have of Katie, right? And I posted some of those PAs in there. When you actually look radiographically, Katie actually has restorable teeth. And so Katie needs, of course, a lot of dentistry, and it can be a lot of expensive dentistry, right? And so it's really, again, so helpful to be able to print and puck mill and have really economical ways of helping someone like Katie, who's 28 years old, and to edentulate her would just be such a horrible thing to do. Like that would weigh so heavy on my soul. And so fortunately, what we were able to do for Katie is actually print her crowns, single unit crowns for her entire maxillary arch with the notion, because again, I really like to underpromise with, okay, we're going to just slowly convert each of these to porcelain, but I've got to get the decay out. I've got to stabilize you. I've got to make sure everything is nice and healthy. And Katie hasn't apparently broken enough to come back in to see me to start her porcelain work. So I don't have good photos of this one, but I want to include it because to me, this photo is just such a great reminder of having something in between a direct composite or a fancy Emex crown, why having something more transitional can be so helpful, or even just the fancy Emex crown, but at an economical level, right? Or zirconia puck. I mean, it really enables us to help people in such a profound way. So
Wow.
that's Katie. And then we're at 7:03. So we'll open some questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mennito and Dr. Gantos. That was really amazing. So much learned there. And yeah, really great that you covered so many questions as the presentation rolled along, because I think you answered and asked really, really smart and good edifying questions. We have a few questions that did come in from the audience as well. So I don't know how much time we'll have to get to all of them. We have 4 so far, but I can go ahead and start. This one is from Dr. Kelly Mayer. Would you suggest using the printed materials only as a PMMA-like temporary unit expectation?
So I would say that we don't really know what we have currently, right? And so I guess this was the point I was trying to make, and I probably didn't make it all that well, but the first 2 generations of these materials are what we've had available for the last 1.5 or 2 years. And we've actually been able to follow them in people's mouths for that long. There have been 2 or 3 newer generations of materials that have likely improved mechanical properties that have since been released, but they're so new that even though the mechanical properties on lab testing and things like that look better and the composition science of them looks like they'll hold up better, we still just don't really know what we're going to get. So I think Meredith was absolutely correct when she said you just have to make sure that you're setting the correct expectation, because I think that these materials at this point, just my own opinion, will hold up as good, if not a little bit better than our classic PMMA type materials, but I just don't know, right? And I don't think anybody really knows at this point. And so case selection is going to be important. Utilizing them in the anterior where they're not going to be under a lot of stress, super important. And the other thing would be just make sure that patients' expectations are appropriate for what you're doing.
Yeah, I think case selection is, it's important no matter what material we're using, right? We want to think about case selection, parafunctional habits, occlusal scheme, of course. But there are times I can tell you there are 3D printed definitive restorations that I've have in people's mouths and still have in people's mouths. You know,
Same.
a little cute old lady who has an upper denture and she needed a bunch of crowns on the lower, and she really didn't want to make that type of investment. She's an older woman. So, you know, being able to do a crown for 50% cost and 3D print it, opposing a denture, those things are money, you know. I mean, it can work. You just want to be thoughtful while, you know, Tony's correct. While we're kind of in some of that gray area, I'm personally someone that always likes to, you know, under promise, right? So, and let people know, hey, this, if this gets you through, you know, the next 12 months while we're transitioning things, great. And if they get 5 years out of it, then I look like a hero. So
Yes, that is so true. Yeah, I love that reminder of under promising, and, you know, and getting that right. Next question from Dr. Dominic Baer. Is there any issue bonding ortho brackets or attachments to the printed restorations? And with the flexure of the printing material, is there any debonding issue with ortho movements and forces?
I haven't experienced it, but I know Tony is like the materials guru. So I'll let you.
Yeah. I have not had that specific occurrence where I've had ortho brackets bonded, but I will say that bonding to these materials is very predictable. It is a very, let's talk about exactly what you have to do, because I know that was one of the other questions. I was peeking at the questions earlier, is how to bond to these materials. And so air abrasion is the first step. You have to micro roughen that surface. You then use a primer that contains 10 MDP, which is in like your Monobond Plus. Your a lot of your ceramic primers have 10 MDP, but you just want to make sure that the one that you're using does. Monobond Plus does. Clearfill Ceramic Primer Plus by Carrare does. You apply that, and then you apply a thin layer of resin. And once again, I know Meredith has a bunch of cases that she's bonded in. I've had a bunch of cases that I've bonded in. The stuff absolutely sticks. I've had zero instances of debonds in my practice. And we're going on a year and a half for some of these cases. So
Yeah,
I would say you're probably not going to have an issue with debonding on those.
Mhm.
And this quick comment from Dr. Ashley Larson, from Dr. Darren Weber. This was great, super informative and high quality class in such a short window. Thank you. This next question by Dr. Ashley Larson, what is your bonding primer? I think you just mentioned that. Is that right, Doctor? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, you just mentioned that. And then we have Dr. Maravar Brown. Can you please show again that final photo of your last case study, of your last case, Katie? Thank you.
Katie, yes, I can get back to Katie here.
So once again, I think kind of the take home message from this, and you know, Meredith and I kind of approached it just a little bit differently, but printing is such a great problem solver in your practice because of how economical it is, and you can kind of make it what you want. You just have to be just a little bit careful about, you know, case selection and what you're promising to patients with these materials as they evolve. And what's different about 3D printed materials versus ceramic materials and really all the other materials that we've ever had in dentistry is that the innovation is happening quicker than our science and our data can keep up. So we're not really going to be able to rely on looking at research studies and things like that, at least for a few more years, to be able to help us predict how well these materials are going to hold up, because it just takes so much time for that science to be generated and those research studies to be done. So, you know, you don't want to be doing those research studies in your practice on a large scale on your patients, right? So I would say be selective about when you choose. A case like we're looking at right here is a really great example of a girl who just really needs help. And the only way sometimes that you can do that is to get creative and to utilize your technology to be able to make that available. Because if she had to wait to pay for ceramic restorations, it would likely end up being a full mouth extraction type of case, because I assume this is moving at a very rapid pace. So Just kind of keep all that stuff in mind. Printing is fantastic. It really is. Milling, though, is it's there, right? Milling is there. Printing is getting there as far as being able to deliver like really high term restorations.
Yeah, and you made a point at the beginning that I loved, which is we're not comparing, like the competition isn't between is a printed restoration on par with Emax or zirconia, right? Because it's not. And I think it would be, or it's not right now. And I think that it would be silly for someone to try and argue that it is. But is there a place for it? Are there indications for it? Are there ways that we can use it to really help our patients in meaningful ways, or stage treatment, to make cases possible for people that otherwise wouldn't be able to afford that treatment? Absolutely. Even just, again, I know we've said this a bunch, but when it's talking about getting creative, being able to problem solve quickly or build your practice, because, one of my favorite things to do that an assistant can completely do with honestly pretty little training is make a single tooth flipper and 3D print that. And that is such a huge practice builder. And when you can turn that around in an hour for someone who has a broken tooth or is missing a tooth, and you're not waiting to, send that coordinate with a lab back and forth for a flipper, or, even sometimes it's a lot more strenuous. You have to have a more freer assistant, right? To make the Essex and fill that in and things like that. That's one way where I just love the patient reception too, when we can quickly restore a missing tooth with a bonded, temporary Maryland bridge or a flipper like that, just being able to get creative.
What's your single visit CAD CAM workflow time period? Like how long does it take you to do a single visit crown?
It depends, to be honest. I build more time. I think mine probably take longer because I am delegating it. So it probably takes a little bit longer, but we book 2 hours for it.
Yeah. I would
Again,
say, I'm sorry.
I was going to say my actual doctor time is I numb the patient, I walk out, they're going to take the pre-op scans, the opposing, and then I walk back in, I prep it, and then I'm out again. And that patient or the assistant is managing tissue, taking a final scan, designing, milling. They're going to take it from the blue phase, take the sprue off, try it in, take a post-op or, a pre-cementation bite wean to make sure it looks beautiful. They're going to stain and glaze it. They're going to come back. They're going to try it in. They're going to get patient consent that they like the way that it looks. They're going to take that off. They're going to etch and prime it, clean everything up. And then we have a walkie system. So then they're going to walkie me saying crown is ready to deliver. I walk in, I put a little cement in there. Air braid, bond, all the things, but I bond that on and then clean that up and I'm out, and they're taking a post-op image, checking the bite. If it needs adjusting, they'll call me back in.
Yeah, I think for us it's anywhere from a 90-minute to a 2-hour appointment. Really efficient though, because like you said, there are periods of time where if you know how to schedule those visits, you can schedule other, production during the time when it's being milled and during the time when it's in the oven. And so that is something that it does take a little bit of an adjustment if you do go from doing a 2-step crown process where you're sending it to a lab to doing single visit, is training your team to make sure that one, that they schedule properly to make sure you're maximizing your production, and two, to make sure that the kind of the workflow goes smoothly. Obviously, empowering your team to do a lot of those steps so you can be more productive.
Absolutely. And I'm typically, again, when I'm working, I typically am managing 3 hygienists also. So I'm doing 3 hygiene exams, and then I'm typically working out of 2 ops anyway. So again, it does come down to sometimes thoughtful scheduling, but it really does allow us to be sort of maximally productive and to keep me busy, which is what I like. I like kind of bouncing around, doing what I need to do, getting in and out of rooms. And it instills, one of the things I could have touched a lot more on is, the team effect, right? Because it instills so much pride in the team members. I mean, I remember when we first started doing this stuff, they would fight over cases, like who gets to stain and glaze this, and they get so proud. I mean, they still, right? Like, oh, look at this little white, at the incisal ledge that I put. Look at this translucency, that I did here, right? Like they take so much pride in it and they love it. And, to think that someone would ever want to regress or want to not do that or just go back to suctioning. Like they don't want to do that. Like they want to build value. And it's great because the patients are impressed with them, and then the patients boost them and build them up. And it creates this really cool energy in the office, right? You know, like they're not just sucking spit, they're providers, they're clinicians, they're thoughtful. And it challenges us to keep kind of pushing each other, right? My assisting team, they can tell you how to design a guard. They can tell you exactly that we're going to have equal pinpoint bilateral posterior occlusion, that we're going to have canine guidance, that the canines are going to disclude. Like they know that because they're doing that stuff. So it's really cool.
That is so cool. And yes, definitely was a question that I was even thinking myself of how do you manage that? It's a really great note to end on. I'm afraid that's all we have time for in terms of questions, but there are lots of other really good questions that have come in that we will send over to Dr. Mennito and Dr. Gantos. But in the meantime, please join me in thanking both of you, thanking them for that really fabulous full of anecdotal and scientific information presentation tonight. Just a reminder to everybody that we will be sending this has been recorded. This conversation has been recorded tonight, and we will be sending it out via email over the coming week. And we'd appreciate your feedback via the survey that's going to pop up shortly on your screens. So thank you all for joining us as well. And we look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you
you.
again.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.